This is lesson 12-1, circumference. Okay, circumference is the distance around a circle. Think of it kind of like the perimeter, but of a circle. It has its own name because it has a unique formula since circles do not have any edges or corners. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is go ahead and copy this circle down, but you don't necessarily have to write these definitions. I want you to do this. The D, that's the distance all the way across. That's for your diameter. And halfway across is R, or your radius. Okay, so I want you to write that. Show that a line all the way across is diameter. A line halfway across is radius. And you can do an R and draw a line out to it and write the word radius, kind of like they've done on this one. Then you're also going to write these two formulas down. C equals pi D and C equals 2 pi R. That is a capital C because that stands for circumference. In math, a capital C always means circumference. Okay, so we have two formulas to solve for circumference. And yes, I know you've seen this stuff before, but it has been a while. Because the reason it has two formulas is because we have two pieces of information we can get from this circle. We can get the diameter or we can get the radius. If radius is halfway across, then two radiuses equals one diameter. Okay, so being that those are equal, that's why we have two formulas. It just has to also be times pi. Here's that 1D. On this side, we have that 2R because 2R equals 1D. So we have to multiply it by pi. Normally, in math, we typically just use the first three numbers, 3.14 for pi. It's a never-ending number. But we just typically use those first three. Well, now our calculator has a pi button that uses the whole number pi. So we're going to be using that, so we're going to have to round to some decimal places today. But we're going to be using these two formulas to solve for the circumference of a circle. Okay, so looking at this first example, find the circumference of the circle and round to the nearest tenth, not tens, tenth. So we first look at what we're given. We're given a circle with a line all the way across. Okay, so that means they gave us diameter. So using our formula, I would just do, if they give you diameter, use the diameter formula. If they give you radius, use the radius formula. You can use either one as long as you know how to calculate radius or diameter. But I'm just going to use this one because it has the diameter in it. So all we have to do is replace the diameter with 3. So we have pi times 3, or 3 pi. You just plug it in your calculator. We don't have to type second enter. You just hit 3 and then the pi button. Okay, here in a second, whenever I work out these problems with you, I will show you where it's at if you haven't found it yet. Okay, but when we do that, we get this long decimal. Okay, but we've got to round to the 10th place. That is one place behind the decimal. Okay, but I don't just drop everything. I have to look behind that number. So behind that 4 is a 2. You have to ask, okay, does 2 round up or down? It rounds down, so I just drop everything, and I have 9.4 inches. Go back and put your units that you were using in the original problem. Okay, if that 2 had rounded up, that 4 would become a 5. So what I want you to do, try 1A and 1B on your own using your calculator, and then I will go over it with you. Okay, so on 1 and 2, these are not super difficult. You just have to know which formula to use and how to use your calculator. So on both of these, we're finding the circumference of the circle. That's the perimeter of a circle, the distance around. And on both of them, they give us diameter. So from our two formulas, we use the one that has diameter. C equals pi D. So diameter for this is 3.75. So I have pi times 3.75. That's where you get to use your calculator. Yes, we typically use that pi is 3.14, okay, but it's a never-ending number. So we'll just use the pi button on your calculator. If you haven't found it yet, you just go straight down, and it's right there. So we have 3.75 times pi, and press the pi button. Now, the hardest part is rounding. Round to the nearest tenth place, which means one behind the decimal. So I'm going to write 2 behind the decimal so we can see. 8 rounds up, so this 7 becomes an 8, so I have 11.8 feet. Don't forget your units. That's the circumference of that circle. On B, we have a circle with a diameter of 5.1 millimeters. Diameter means all the way across. So we use C equals pi d. So I have 5.1 times pi. And when you're typing that in, you don't even have to write times. Just put 5.1 pi, and the calculator knows to multiply it. Okay, we get 16.02212253 and so on, but we only need to round to 1 behind the decimal place. 2 rounds down, so it just drops off. 16.0 is just 16, and it is in millimeters. So the circumference of that circle is 16. On example 2, we're still doing the same thing. Find the circumference of the circle, round to the nearest tenth. So this makes it super easy by plugging in our calculator. On this one, they give us radius when it's halfway across. So that is r. So looking at your formulas, we have C equals pi d or C equals 2 pi r. Even if you wanted to just use C equals pi d every time, that's fine. It's just you have to remember that the diameter goes all the way across. So if the radius is halfway, the diameter would have to be another 5.3 here, which would make it 10.6. Okay, so I'm going to use this one because it just has the r in it. C equals 2 pi r. So r was given to us, that is 5.3. And I would go ahead and multiply these two numbers together first. When we do that, we get 10.6. Then we have 10.6 pi. We plug that in the calculator, and it comes out to 33.3, and then we have 0, 0, 0 before we have some other numbers. So when we're rounding, 0 doesn't change anything, so it drops off and we have 33.3 centimeters. That would be our answer. I like how this explains, it says if you're asked for an exact answer, leave it in terms of pi, which means your final answer would just be 10.6 pi, because it means it's 10.6 times whatever pi is, to be exact. Okay, because this technically is an approximation. So what I want you to do is you're going to try number 2. Find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 7 millimeters, round to the nearest tenth, and then I will go over it with you. Okay, on number 2, it said find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 7 millimeters, round to the nearest tenth. So they gave us that the radius is 7 millimeters. You don't have to draw a circle, but if you want to, you can. Radius, we have to remember, is just halfway across the circle. Okay? So it starts with an R, so you have to use the formula with the r, 2 pi r. Okay, you don't necessarily have to if you can figure out what your diameter would be. If halfway is 7, all the way across would be 14. Then you could use pi d because the diameter would be 14. You have to know the difference between radius and diameter. So when we plug this in, 2 times pi times the radius, which is 7. I can do that. 2 times 7 is 14. Now you just plug it in your handy dandy calculator. Oh, whoops. Hold on, my mode changed. Okay, so I do want to, let me change it back to show y'all. I'm glad I caught that. If for some reason, like when I type 14 pi, let me come closer, and I press enter, it just says 14 pi again. So what you have to do is change the mode on your calculator. So come up here beside the second button and press mode, and you have to hit your down arrow till you are hovering over the word classic. Press enter. Then you can clear out. Now when you try it, 14 pi, and press enter, it's going to give you that long decimal. So we have 43.982 and so on, but we have to round to the nearest tenths place. So I'll look behind it. Does 8 round up or down? It rounds up. So that 9 now would change to a 10. So this becomes 44 millimeters. We can use the circumference to solve a problem. And I don't mean finding circumference, we can use what the circumference is. So this third example says Bernard works at a community center that has a circular swimming pool with a circumference of 40 meters. So they went ahead and told us the distance all the way around the pool, the circumference is 40 meters. He would like to use a rope to divide the pool down the center. What should be the length of the rope? Well, since he's wanting to put the rope across the dead center of the pool, that would be your diameter. So on this problem, we're not asked the circumference, we're asked what is the diameter. So what we do is we work backwards. Since we're asking for diameter, you would start with the circumference formula that has diameter in it, C equals pi d. Now we don't know what the diameter is, that's what we're looking for, but we know the circumference is 40. So we can replace that with 40. We get that 40 equals pi d. Now, you're solving for d. Don't let it confuse you when you see pi. Pi is a number. That's no different than if it had said 40 equals 2d. To solve for d, because those are multiplied, we would divide by 2. Okay, that's essentially what we're doing here. It's pi. Pi is still a number. Since it's pi d, we would divide both sides by pi to get it to cancel there. You do it on the other side as well. And if you plug that in your calculator, 40 divided by pi, it's a long decimal, but when we round it to the 10th place, we get 0.7. So it's a squiggle because that means approximately, it's not exact. The diameter across the pool is approximately 12.7 meters. Make sure you go back and put your units. So then it says, being that we estimated kind of by rounding, check and make sure that it works in the problem. So C equals pi d. If I plug in a diameter of 12.7, I get approximately 39.9, which is super close to 40. So we know our answer was good. It was reasonable. So I'm going to have you try, let's see. Let's do just 3A. I'm not going to make you do both of these. Try 3A. Pause the video, and then I will go over it with you. Okay, problem number 3 says a Ferris wheel has a circumference of 226 meters. What is the radius of the Ferris wheel? So on this one, they go ahead and give us the final answer. It's 226 meters, okay? And then it says, what is the radius? So we're trying to figure out R. So if you go back and look at your formulas, this is the one that has an R. C equals 2 pi R. We know what the total circumference is. It's 226 meters. So I'm going to replace that with what it says it is. 226 meters is 2 pi r. Now we solve for r. So this is all being multiplied, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. It's 113. Now I divide by pi. That is a number. That's like dividing by 2. Pi is a number. So, R equals, and you just plug that in your calculator. So I have 113 divided by pi. And we get 35.969, so on. We're going to round. 6 rounds up, so the 9 changes up. So it comes out to 36 meters is our radius of the Ferris wheel. You know, they're talking about the ride. Okay, and people sit on each little deal. They're saying the radius halfway across that is 36 meters.